Hello everyone and welcome to another Planet Zoo video where we're going to be doing a bit more speculation on a DLC that I personally would really like to see Planet Zoo implement, and that is the Reptilian Animal Pack. Now, I'm quite a reptile enthusiast myself. I love crocodilians, I love snakes, I love lizards, turtles and tortoises, the like. They are just such a fascinating group of animals, and in Planet Zoo right now, we can't really make the most diverse reptile houses that we could. And because in reality, reptile houses have such a great variety of different species. There are chameleons, cobras, pythons, and all sorts of other animals in there. Even some more obscure ones like mastagures, girdle lizards, beauty rat snakes, and all that sort of stuff. We don't have any of those in Planet Zoo right now. We do have some pretty cool species like the Gila monster and the boa constrictor that are pretty common in captivity, but in the grand scheme of things, the reptile diversity in Planet Zoo is minimal to say the least. So this is why I would like to have a reptilian animal pack, and there are many other things that we can also implement in a pack like this. So let's have a look at a few of those. And this pack is going to include both exhibit and habitat animals, but a majority will be exhibit animals that we're working into an update feature that we are about to discuss. So let's talk about the potential major update feature for this pack: expanded exhibit customization. The exhibits in Planet Zoo they're not the best things to work with right now, but this update would take tools from the walkthrough exhibit system and apply them to the regular exhibits and add some new ones. So the exhibits would be able to be placed in multiple sizes: small, medium, which would be the current exhibit we have now, large and extra large. They would also be able to be customized to display a specific biome between tropical, desert, grassland, aquatic and temperate. Every one of these exhibits can also have a semi-aquatic body of water added to them, depending on the species. For example, you can have an extra large tropical exhibit for an animal like the reticulated python. It could just stay the way it is, but to increase the welfare of the python, a semi-aquatic configuration can be added, which will allow the python to hang out in water. The exhibits can also have their barrier configured, much like the walkthrough exhibits can, to different materials such as glass, wood potentially, faux rock, concrete, or just null barriers, the latter allowing players to create their own borders for these exhibits, allowing for a lot more creativity when working with these different exhibits. Another possible update feature could be the crocodile feeding, which would be able to show off the explosive power of these ancient predators. The way it would work is a keeper would enter the habitat with a food bucket and a stick. They then approach the edge of the water, staying about 2 or more meters away from the edge, hanging the meat from their stick. A crocodile then emerges from the water, possibly with an initial lunge, and plays it, and the animation would play out with a couple of missed snaps, perhaps even a death roll, particularly from the larger species like the salty, Nile crocodile and American alligator. And then it gets the meat, and then the crocodile would retreat back into the water and sit at the top of the water, throwing its head back to get the food down its gullet. A bonus could be getting crocodilians properly basking on land and also resting underwater. These features would be applicable to all in-game crocodilians and also the new species discussed in this video. It would also be good, given this is a reptile themed update, to get a size change to the giant tortoises. Currently they are far too similar in size to the recently added African spurred tortoise. They should instead be far larger, like as seen here. I'm always going to suggest remasters to animals in updates, and in this update I would like to see particularly a remaster to the saltwater crocodile. This remaster is done by Gaboy, and perhaps another remaster that could be done to the Komodo dragon, and if they wanted to just do all the reptiles, Nile monitor, gharial and the giant tortoises. Possibly even to a few of the exhibit reptiles too, like the boa constrictor and the western diamondback rattlesnake. Now let's start with our first species, the northern king cobra. For those who don't know, king cobras have actually been divided into 4 different species. So the northern king cobra is by far the one more people are familiar with, found in mainland Asia. There is the Sunda king cobra found in Indonesia that is also quite widespread in captivity, but I opted for the northern as it is just much more popular and I think can get larger. They are the longest venomous snake in the world and aren't actually true cobras. So they're in their own genus Ophiophagus, which true cobras are actually in the genus of Naja. The first habitat animal of this video is the false gharial or Tomistoma. So this is a mysterious crocodilian from Southeast Asia that not a lot of people know about. It is, however, my favourite of the crocodilians. It just has such a unique look, looks very prehistoric, and I just love their patterning as well. They're also an endangered species, so getting more representation for them in more common media would certainly help this species in the long run. But they're a very cool species and would help diversify the Asian roster of crocodilians, as they're not a true gharial, they're not even a crocodile, they are a crocodilian in their own family. All the other members of its group are actually extinct, so it is the last of its kind. Next is Australia's largest lizard, the Parenti, a large monitor lizard that roams the deserts in the middle of the country. So they are possibly the coolest lizard in Australia, or at least one of them, because they are actually very fast runners, and are also a primarily reptile eater. So they'll eat many small lizards like bearded dragons, blue tongues, thorny devils, but they'll also take on some of the biggest snakes, like the king browns and inland taipans that you find out in that desert. The Fiji crested iguana is a critically endangered species from a few islands in the Fiji archipelago. So there are a few species of iguana that live in Fiji, like you have a banded iguana, actually a few kinds of banded iguana, but I opted for the crested iguana just because of its colour variation. You can have fairly dark green individuals, but you can also get individuals like the one seen here, which can display a vivid blue with a mix of teal, which makes them a very eye-catching lizard, and I would certainly love to see them. So this group of lizards in the Brachylophus genus are the only iguanas in the whole of the Eastern Hemisphere. So, fun fact for you there. There happen to be an awful lot of lizards in this pack. I did try to even it out, but when making a reptile pack, I could not ignore the plumed basilisk. This species is possibly one of the most exciting lizards in the world, as they have the uncanny ability to run across water. So using their large feet and their lightweight build, they can actually run across the water, fleeing predators that might see them while resting on a branch. And even though they have the name basilisks, they are in no way related to the mythological serpent from the Harry Potter films and other forms of mythology. We had to include at least one tortoise in this pack, so I went for my favourite, the radiated tortoise, a critically endangered species from the dry forests of Madagascar. They get their name from the yellow spots on their scutes that radiate with stripes out from the middle, and makes them possibly one of the most colourful tortoises out there, although you could argue the red-footed and yellow-footed tortoises of South America could potentially be more so. But as a critically endangered species, they would certainly lean into Planet Zoo's conservation theme. And they're pretty common in zoos and in captivity in general, as they are actually a victim of the illegal wildlife trade, with hundreds of tortoise being taken out of Madagascar every year, potentially even thousands, every year, and sold as illegal pets and smuggled around the world. But this species needs our help, and so putting it in Planet Zoo would certainly let a lot more people know about it. Don't let its appearance deceive you. The northern tuatara is not actually a lizard. It is actually a rhynchocephalian, an ancient group of reptiles that has lived for a very long time, since before the dinosaurs actually. And they are now only one species, the tuatara from New Zealand. I've chosen specifically the northern tuatara as it is a species that is much more prevalent in captivity than its Cook Strait counterpart. And they are found in the temperate rainforests of New Zealand and live in burrows, and fun fact, they actually have a pineal gland. So what that is actually a sort of third eye. It's a photoreceptive gland that is on the top of their head, which is sensitive to light. And yeah, not a lot of animals have it, but it's particularly something that you can see in ancient species, like the tuatara, or fish like the lamprey. Now, Planet Zoo has lacked a chameleon for a very long time. But when choosing a chameleon, it is very difficult, as they are a very diverse group of lizards found across Madagascar and mainland Africa, and in this case, also found in the Middle East. So this is the veiled chameleon, or Yemen chameleon, found in the mountains of Yemen and other parts of the Arabian Peninsula. So they're actually one of the larger chameleons, surprisingly, as the more popular addition by the community would be the panther chameleon. Though they are arguably more colourful, like coming in a wider range of colours than the veiled chameleon, this species is far more common in captivity. And given its size, you would be more likely to see its colours more vividly. But this is the only chameleon species I've actually seen in person, so I'd personally vouch for it as it's familiar to me. But basically, if we got any chameleon, I would go for that. And yeah, at this point, any chameleon would do, really. Next is the reticulated python, the longest snake in the world, found in Southeast Asia. They can get up to, the largest individuals have gotten to 9 meters in length, which is quite astonishing. And yeah, they can take on a whole range of different prey, from large deer and pigs, and sometimes have even eaten people, particularly the very largest reticulated pythons. But they're a very common species displayed in captivity, and they get their name from the netted pattern, which is what reticulated means, is having a netted pattern. So all these markings that go down the length of the snake, that is what makes up that netted pattern. And it's the same definition for the reticulated giraffe that we have in the game right now. That sort of netted spotted pattern. But yeah, this species is probably the #1 python on my list. There are tons of other pythons to choose from because, well, we don't have any in Plant Zoo right now. The yellow anaconda and boa constrictor are boas, not pythons. And if we were to get just one, I would go the reticulated, just because of its great size and beautiful coloration. Next is the largest crocodilian missing from the game currently, the Nile crocodile of Africa. So this is the largest reptile in Africa and the second largest of all crocodilians after the saltwater crocodile that we currently have. And out of all the continents, the one continent that we don't have a species of crocodilian from is Africa. And this is a place that actually has 5 species. I'm pretty sure it's 5 of these. And the Nile crocodile being the largest of them. They're a very iconic species, very common sight on safaris, particularly those around large bodies of water, such as rivers and lakes. And they're also the most prevalent crocodilian species in captivity. I know I thought for many years there was actually the American alligator, but no, it is in fact the Nile crocodile being found in all sorts of places in captive care. So yeah, if we would Nile crocodile, put it in this pack. If you were to choose one crocodile, put the Nile crocodile in. Next is a very iconic Australian lizard, the frill-necked lizard, a species of agamid from northern Australia and Papua New Guinea. They are best known for that large frill that expands from their neck when they open their mouths. It is a feature that inspired the iconic Jurassic Park Dilophosaurus. However, the frill is not prevalent in the real animal. But frill-necked lizards have the uncanny ability to also run on their hind legs, which is something that many lizards can do, but it's not really a common thing that you see in Australia necessarily, especially from the agamid family. As all the species that I've met, the water dragons, the bearded dragons, and the central netted dragons, they don't run on their hind legs, but the frill-neck does, which really just makes it look a lot more like a dinosaur. But yeah, this species spends quite a lot of time up in trees. They are particularly arboreal for an agamid, and would certainly make it a very interesting species to display in the exhibits. Next is the Central American eyelash viper. Why do I specify that's the Central American? It's because recently the eyelash viper was actually divided up into multiple different species, many of which being found in isolated parts of the Andes and other areas in northern South America. but the Central American eyelash viper remains consistent, and is a species that comes in a whole range of colour variations, however the most iconic being this golden colour. They're probably best known as one of the best hunters of hummingbirds, being able to strike at just the right speed to be able to catch a hummingbird on the wing. And yeah, they're not an easy animal to catch for most predators, but the eyelash viper manages to succeed. But because they're such a beautiful snake, I would certainly love to see them in the game. Next is another one of Latin America's most famous serpents, the emerald tree boa. So this isn't a python, however it does often get confused with the green tree python of Northern Australia and Papua New Guinea. And I've certainly confused it quite a few times. I've looked at it and I've often thought, that's just a green tree python, what's it doing in South America? But no, I was a confused little kid when I learned that. And but as much as I would love to include the green tree python here, the emerald tree boa is far more requested by the community. But hey, if we got one or the other, they pretty much fill the same niche. They're both green. They're almost I think this one actually gets a little bit bigger than the python, but yeah, they look almost exactly the same, just from different parts of the world. Next is perhaps one of the most popular exhibit requests, the alligator snapping turtle, one of the largest of the freshwater turtle species and certainly the most infamous, with a powerful bite that is capable of probably snapping a human's arm if you put it in the wrong place. But they are one of the most specialized hunters, lying in the bottom of a river or a lake or a swamp, pretending to be a dead log, and yeah, they will open their mouths wide and wriggle a little appendage that forms on their tongue, which resembles a worm. With their mouth agape, they will wiggle that around and attract any fish that are a little bit tempted by that possible worm meal, and will then get snapped by those powerful jaws of the alligator snapping turtle. Now, in many zoos, they do remain quite motionless, as they would in the wild, just waiting for prey to come by. However, I've been fortunate enough to actually witness a very active alligator snapping turtle on a visit to Sydney Zoo, and yeah, I was very surprised to just see it swimming around. Like, they're very capable swimmers, but they will generally spend a lot of time just sitting in the water, waiting for prey to come to them. Another group of lizards that has gone under the radar for Planet Zoo is the geckos. Geckos are a very interesting group of lizards found on just about every continent except Antarctica, because no reptile has ever survived there since the dinosaurs. But tokay geckos are perhaps my favourite. With bright blue coloration and orange polka dots, they are one of the most interesting looking of all geckos. But what makes them even more interesting is their call, which actually gave them their name. It goes tokay, 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 and that is how you get the tokay gecko. They're found all across Southeast Asia and almost to New Guinea actually. They're very widespread and very adaptable animals. Like many geckos found in your towns and cities, tokay geckos are among them, particularly in Southeast Asia, but also Florida, as they are one of many reptiles that don't live in North America that have run amok as lost pets and just being dumped in the wild. But tokay geckos are possibly my favourite gecko, and I would certainly like to see them as they are very iconic. Another iconic reptile is the pig-nosed or fly river turtle, a species of almost completely aquatic turtle from the Mary River in Northern Australia. Actually, a few rivers around there, actually. But they are an endangered species, unfortunately, due to pollution in their rivers. But they are possibly the cutest of the freshwater turtles, depending on who you ask. Just that little piggy nose has made them quite well known. But they don't actually have feet like many freshwater turtles. They much more resemble a sea turtle. And given Planet Zoo hasn't shown any real sign of adding aquarium animals, the pig-nosed turtle could be the closest that we'll ever get to a sea turtle. And honestly, I wouldn't complain. It is a largely aquatic turtle, but it's also an Australian turtle, so I would certainly like to see it to give a bit more Australian diversity to the reptile collection. Next is the beauty rat snake, also known as the cave racer. So they are a very widespread species of snake found in Eastern Asia and a bit of Southeast Asia as well. But I thought, since reptiles live in all sorts of different environments, why not have a reptile that, well, can live in caves? And the rat snake is one of those. And they're also very colourful. And I also wanted to make sure we had a great diversity of different kinds of snake in this pack, as I wanted elapids, I wanted vipers, boas, pythons, but I also needed colubrids, which is the family of snakes that the rat snake belongs to. That can't be said for our next edition, however. So we had the eyelash viper earlier, now the gaboon viper. It's almost cheating to have two snakes, but given the amount of lizards I had before, I thought I had to just get rid of one, and so I did, and boom, we have the gaboon viper. I thought we also needed an African species in here, so gaboon viper is it, as they are possibly my favourite of the African snakes, just because they are so cool. Their patterning allows them to completely disappear into the leaf litter and you would not see them. But they are also the viper with the biggest fangs of the whole group, able to pierce right through the muscle and potentially even into the bone of its prey or an unlucky person. They're found in the forests of Central Africa, and yeah, they're possibly one of the most intimidating looking snakes you could ever encounter. But like all vipers, they are sit and wait predators, so they wouldn't really be moving around a lot. Easy job for the animators, but yeah. Gaboon vipers, however, are just one of my favourite snakes, and I thought, why not, I would include it here. One of our last animals is the Aral river turtle. So this is a species that has seen a surprising climb on the meta wish list, and this is another habitat species. Now I know I'm going to get flack in the comments about saying, why is the alligator snapping turtle an exhibit animal and the Aral river turtle not? I mean, you could potentially argue that Frontier could do a thing where you have some exhibit animals that can translate between habitat and exhibit, but personally I've seen alligator snapping turtles more in their own standalone exhibits than I have in a large habitat. Not to say it doesn't happen, but I certainly have not experienced it. However, Aral river turtles are very well known for being an open-air habitat animal, being displayed in aviaries and also alongside many South American animals like capybaras, tapirs, and all sorts of other species. Like, they're just that big, and it would be really nice to have a swimming turtle in the habitats. And yeah, one from South America is always welcome, because any South American animal goes these days. And our last animal part of the proper pack is the central bearded dragon. Possibly Australia's best known reptile, I want to say, or at least the bearded dragon in general. But they are easily the most common pet lizard in the world. I've seen more pet bearded dragons than I have leopard geckos or anything else. And it is just down to the fact that they do make pretty good pets. Like, once they settle down, they can actually be very docile, and sometimes quite affectionate too. But this is a zoo game, so the central bearded dragon, even though it's a more common display as a pet, it is also quite widespread in zoos, given its Australian species status, and given it's more common in Australian zoos than zoos outside. I think it warranted its inclusion. And also this way we get Australia's most famous lizards that are prominent in captivity. We'd have the blue tongue, we'd have the bearded dragon, the frill neck, and the perenni. And yeah, that is the last of the reptilian animal pack. But given reptiles are so diverse, I could not make this video without suggesting some possible alternatives. One of my favourite snakes is the South American Bushmaster, the largest of all vipers, with the record being 3.5 meters long. So that's a pretty big viper. But they're found in, of course, South America, and are actually pretty hard to find. They may be big, but that patterning allows it to perfectly camouflage into the leaf litter. But I really wanted to include the Bushmaster because, well, it's a really cool name, and they're very cool snakes. But they're not that common in captivity. They're more of a treasure when you find them in the wild than in captivity, so I can understand why I didn't include it, but man, I wanted to. Another snake that you might be surprised did not make it into the final pack is the black mamba. They're a very famous snake, possibly the most famous snake in the world, unless you think the king cobra is the most famous. But I've certainly heard more people click to the name black mamba than king cobra. And they get that infamy from their potential danger to people, as they do have a very fierce venom, but they would do anything to not bite a person. It is just unfortunate accidents like all snake bites. But it is a very famous snake, so you might be wondering why the heck I did not include it. It is just a similar situation to the Bushmaster. They're a cool snake, but they're not that common in captivity, at least to my knowledge. But I also didn't want to do an overdose of elapids, and I know I did 2 vipers, but the second viper had good reasoning. The black mamba, though it's very famous, I didn't think really would add the same degree of oomph as some of the other snakes. It doesn't really have the flavour that I went with to make this pack. I sort of just went for animals that would certainly fill up a reptile house and be a good diversity, not necessarily picking the most famous of the lot, even though a lot of the species I did pick are quite famous. But anyway, black mamba unfortunately didn't make it in. Another group of reptiles, even though we do have one kind, the western diamondback rattlesnake in the base game, the rattlesnake group as a whole, Crotalus, is very diverse. There are so many different kinds that I was a bit disappointed I didn't include one of them. So the timber rattlesnake is one of those, found in eastern North America in the woodlands. You also have the eastern diamondback rattlesnake, which is possibly more famous than the western diamondback, though the western species does actually have a faster strike, and possibly is more infamous, but the eastern diamondback is also up there. And then, just one of my personal favourites, the Yucatan neotropical rattlesnake. I thought of this one just because I love its colouring, that beautiful red stripe that goes down from the back of the head to about the start of the main body. Yeah, really just gives this snake a really eye-catching look. Possibly one of the most colourful rattlesnakes out there. Another species of lizard that I was ashamed of myself for not including was the northern caiman lizard. So this species is part of the tegu family, similar to the Argentine black and white tegu, which is another species like the tokay gecko that's running rampant in Florida. But this species is actually largely semi-aquatic, spending a lot of time in water. So it would certainly be a unique lizard to have in the game, given that semi-aquatic status. And it's also very colourful, with a bright red head and a bright green body with hints of orange and gold and yellow in there, and a bit of blue too. It would be a very colourful lizard, but I felt the lizards that we already had were colourful enough, except for some, but were also more famous and more requested, I felt, than the caiman lizard. Another species that I really did want to include is the Cuban crocodile. Easily my second favourite crocodilian after the false gara. Honestly, when I say something's my favourite, they are really neck and neck. It's like how the red panda is my favourite animal, but orca are coming right in at second. But Cuban crocodiles are just a very cool crocodilian. They are probably best known for being a galloping crocodile, even though many crocodilians do gallop when they need to. Cuban crocodiles sort of do it voluntarily, as they are the most terrestrial of all crocodilians, doing quite a lot of their hunting on land. This species is also critically endangered, so seeing it in a zoo game would certainly benefit this animal. in the wider public eye. However, it is pretty well known as that crocodile that chases a zookeeper around the paddock or pen. But yeah, Cuban crocodiles are also very common in reptile houses, and honestly, as much as I love false gharials, I would probably change it out for the Cuban crocodile simply because it does have a lot more to it that can make it more unique than the false gharial. Honestly, it sounds like blasphemy for me just saying that, but Cuban crocodiles are arguably cooler. I have to say it. But yeah, okay. Know what I'll do? I'm changing out the false gharial for Cuban crocodile. Hurts my heart to do it, but the Cuban crocodile is a very cool animal that, yeah, I don't want to leave out. Another species I did leave out is the bizarre mata, which is a species of freshwater turtle from South America. It resembles leaf litter and bits of fallen vegetation in the river, helps it camouflage from its prey, and when it does see its prey, it will lunge forward, snapping it up, similar to many snake-neck turtles in Oceania, though they are unrelated. Another famous lizard that was excluded is the thorny devil. Now, they are a very famous lizard, one of Australia's most famous. They're about the size of a regular house mouse, but they are very spiny. So picking one up would certainly hurt a little, as yeah, those thorns really don't look very friendly. But this animal is not very common in captivity. It is only kept in 2 centres, and I believe they're both in Alice Springs in the red centre of Australia, as this animal has a specialised diet for desert black ants. It feeds on just about nothing else. It's basically it's almost a giant panda of the lizard world. Even though giant pandas do eat other stuff than bamboo sometimes. But yeah, this species is hard to keep just because of that unique diet, and so it really can only be kept in its native range. So we haven't yet succeeded in growing desert black ants in captivity and just making them a food supply for the devils. Hint, hint. Like, I don't know why they haven't just done that, make an ant farm. But yeah, thorny devils are interesting for various other reasons. So they can actually drink water without having to even bend down and have their mouth touch a puddle of water, because there really aren't a lot of those in the desert. So what the thorny devil does is, when it rains every once or twice a year, it will dip its toe into that puddle, or dip its whole foot in even, and through capillary action will bring the water up between the grooves in between scales, well, in the grooves in between scales, and all the way up to the mouth, and it will drink the water. So it's a very interesting trick, and certainly has kept this animal alive for millions of years. And another thing they have is that large bump at the base of the neck. So that is a sort of false head to distract a potential predator that sees the lizard from above. They will see that and potentially think that that might be the back of the head. They'll get a face full of spines and probably never do it again. So yeah, that's just a few tricks and a few facts about the thorny devil. And they're a very cool lizard, I just did not include them in this pack. And now we come to the panther chameleon. It is a bit smaller than the veiled chameleon, although they can sometimes be the same size depending on the individual that you're comparing. But they are arguably more colourful, as they do have a larger range of colours that they come in. I only picked the veiled chameleon because I was more familiar with it. Panther chameleon could easily replace it, and I would not be fussed if the panther chameleon did. I just used personal preference as a basis for putting the animals in the packs. But yeah, the panther chameleon is a very, very cool chameleon species, possibly the most famous. But yeah, I just thought veiled chameleon will do. Another species that is very cool is the D. albertus. I think it's the D. albertus python, also known as just the white-lipped python, which I feel like I should have just called it. And they are possibly one of the most beautiful snakes in the world, if not the most beautiful. Their scales are iridescent and reflect light in such a way is that they look like rainbow snakes. There is a rainbow snake in North America, but I don't think it's quite like this one. It is just so pretty in the way that the scales reflect light. And I'm almost ashamed that I didn't include it. Like, they're not that common in captivity. Actually, I think they are. Like, they might be a very cool common snake for herpetologists and reptile keepers around the world. But yeah, I was just going to go with the reticulated python as it was bigger, more famous, and my personal preference. But if we were to get another python, I would certainly put the D. albertus python on the list, because it is a very beautiful snake. I just wonder how the iridescence would work in an exhibit setting. But yeah, let me know what you think. White-lipped python or reticulated python, which would you take? I mean, popularity can just go over pretty, so possibly. Then we have the most venomous snake in the world, the inland taipan, a species of elapid from the red centre of Australia, with the most toxic venom of any snake on the planet. And it is one of the few snakes that has never had a successful anti-venom batch developed, because the way anti-venom is produced is when they develop it through injecting a horse with the venom, and it slowly becomes immune. The inland taipan's venom kills the horse, so there aren't really many bigger animals to use, really, in Australia at least. But yeah, so basically, just never get bitten by an inland taipan, because I don't know if you'd be able to survive it. But they're a very cool snake. They only come out for a certain time of the day, and then they'll retreat back underground to go hunting for their favorite prey, which is rodents. And out in the desert, you find a meal, you gotta get it quick. And rodents can easily escape, so the venom wasn't made for us. It wasn't made for predators, it was made for its prey. Because living out in the desert, food is scarce. And so if you get a chance at a meal, you have to take it for your own survival. So the inland taipan has such a venom to kill its prey in seconds, which can allow it to get a successful meal. Like, it does fail, like no predator is 100% successful. Unless you cheat nature. Like, that is just the way it works. But the inland taipan is really only found in Australian reptile collections, although I do think it does have some individuals kept internationally. But yeah, it has such a reputation as the most venomous snake in the world, yet there has never been a reported death from this snake. So it's going good so far, because yeah, it just does not live near people. Like, that's why no one's ever died to an inland taipan, and hopefully no one ever does, as it would be bad for this snake and the respect that people have for it. But yeah, that's just my little inland taipan talk. But yeah, I wanted to include it, but the king cobra was a much more valuable addition, I felt. And the last species that I did not include, that I was going to include in this video, is the green anaconda, the heaviest snake in the world. Yeah, I didn't include it simply because I already had the reticulated python. I didn't want there to be just two giant snakes in one pack. I wanted there to be a bit of variation. Like, even though the king cobra is the biggest venomous snake, it gets up to 6 meters. Reticulated python can get up to 9. And green anacondas to a similar length, just a bit heavier. But I also only wanted to keep it to just about one of each kind of animal. So only one boa, and I chose the emerald tree boa, as we do already have the yellow anaconda. But if we do get it later down the line in a Latin American animal pack, I'd certainly be happy to see it, as it is a very iconic reptile. Now let's talk about potential scenery for the pack itself. So the stuff I was talking about before was more of the free update. This is potential stuff as scenery. We don't really have a lot of bones and skeletons that you can display for any of the animals in the game. And reptiles as a group are perhaps the most interesting. So I would certainly find it valuable to have the skulls of a crocodile, an alligator, and a gharial as actual skeletal pieces, because it would help. It would add to guest education. It could even just be a picture on a screen, even of the gharial skull and the crocodile and alligator skulls next to each other, just to compare the diversity of crocodilians. You could also get a snake skeleton. I would opt for a reticulated python skeleton, as they're one of the more common that are displayed out there. Maybe a Komodo dragon skeleton. And we could even go one step further and include the reptiles that can't be alive in Planet Zoo. The animals like Sarcosuchus, which has a very iconic skull. I would certainly love to display that in a zoo and see guests walk by that in awe. And even potentially get a skeleton of a dinosaur or two, like a T-Rex, Triceratops, or even just the 5 most famous dinosaurs. Just top 5, that's all we need, and like you can have a pretty cool display for that. And having a bit more meat on the bones, could potentially have full statues of an individual from each of these animal groups. So a big statue crocodile, a statue snake, statue tortoise, statue turtle, and a statue lizard of some kind. They could even function as benches. That would be fun, having a reptile animal pack bench, and it's just a snake or a crocodile. Like, that would be pretty fun. Another thing I wouldn't mind seeing is a big crocodile piece that can act as sort of a doorway into the reptile house, and you can color it in all different ways to make it look like the temple of stone of a temple, or even potentially a snake head and a lizard head. Could have a good bit of variation there. And just a couple of reptile habitat items, so maybe some heat lamps that you can place in reptile shelters, and they can just bask under those. A basking rock would also be pretty cool, like a reptile can climb up onto that and just bask in the sun. And particular faux rock water dishes would also be really fun to have for the reptiles. But that is all. So that is the Reptilian animal pack. Let me know what you thought. Would you like a reptilian themed animal pack in Planet Zoo? Because I know in recent years Frontier has done a stellar job with their reptiles, and I'd certainly love to see that repeated with many species. And yeah, reptile houses are just currently hard to build. You can't really do a lot with them other than just the species that are currently available. So if we got a whole reptile pack, you'd certainly be able to make something a bit more impressive, with all sorts of different reptiles displayed throughout. And it would allow us to get some pretty fan favourite species into the game that we don't have, like chameleons, cobras, frilled neck lizards, and all sorts of others. And yeah, leave your thoughts in the comments. What would your ideal reptile animal pack be? Now, the reason I included 20 species is because I think about 15 of them are exhibit animals and wouldn't really do a lot of moving. So thought it might actually be easier, although 20 is quite an ask. So potentially 12 thereabouts. But yeah, let me know your thoughts in the comments. Would you like a reptile pack? Would you not like a reptile pack? Anything, put it down there, and I'll see you all in the next one. Bye bye.